The sky above Earth turned dark as hundreds of massive alien ships descended from space. These ships were unlike anything humanity had ever seen, their sleek metallic surfaces glinting like polished steel under the fading sunlight. The largest ship, a towering behemoth that seemed to block out the horizon, hovered silently above the planet's surface. From it came a voice, cold and mechanical, broadcasting across every radio, television, and internet channel. "This is the Valeth Dominion," the voice declared. "You will surrender your world to us. Resistance is futile. Kneel before the Empire or face destruction." Ethan Cole sat on the porch of his modest farmhouse in rural Montana, staring at the sky with wide eyes. His hands trembled slightly as he held the remote control for the old TV sitting inside the living room. On the screen, the same message repeated over and over again. Beside him, his wife, Lisa, clutched their 6-year-old daughter, Emily, tightly to her chest. The little girl looked up at her mother with wide, frightened eyes. "Mommy, are they really going to hurt us?" she asked in a small voice. Lisa forced a smile, though her lips quivered. "No, sweetie, everything will be okay," she said, though her tone betrayed her fear. Ethan didn't say anything. He just stared at the ships, his mind racing. He had served in the military years ago, but now he was just a farmer trying to live a quiet life. He never thought he'd see the day when aliens would come to Earth, and he certainly never imagined they would demand surrender so arrogantly. In Washington, D.C., the situation was even more chaotic. Government officials gathered in a secure bunker beneath the White House, debating what to do next. A young diplomat named Olivia Bennett stood at the center of the room, her face pale but determined. She had spent years studying interstellar diplomacy, hoping to one day make contact with extraterrestrial life. But this wasn't how she imagined first contact would go. "We need to negotiate," she urged the group. "If we fight them, we'll lose. We don't have the technology to match theirs." General Carter Hayes, a grizzled man with sharp features and an even sharper temper, slammed his fist on the table. "Negotiate with those monsters. They've already destroyed 3 cities. If we give in now, they'll enslave us, or worse." His voice rose with anger, and the other officials exchanged uneasy glances. Everyone knew Hayes was right about one thing. Humanity's weapons were no match for the advanced firepower of the Valeth. As the debate raged on in the capital, chaos unfolded across the globe. People flooded the streets, some running for shelter, others protesting the invasion. In New York City, crowds gathered outside the United Nations building, holding signs that read, "We will not surrender and Earth stands together." But not everyone felt brave. In Los Angeles, families packed their cars and fled the city, unsure where to go but desperate to escape. Back in Montana, Ethan finally stood up from the porch steps. He walked inside and grabbed his rifle from the closet, checking to make sure it was loaded. Lisa followed him, her expression frantic. "What are you doing?" she demanded. "You can't fight them, Ethan. You saw what happened in Chicago. They leveled the entire city. I'm not going to sit here and wait for them to kill us," Ethan replied firmly. "If they come here, I'll do whatever I have to do to protect you and Emily." Lisa opened her mouth to argue, but no words came out. Instead, tears welled up in her eyes, and she hugged Emily closer. That night, the sound of explosions echoed in the distance. The Valeth fleet had begun targeting military bases and government installations, systematically dismantling Earth's defenses. Ethan stayed awake, watching the horizon. He knew the battle ahead would be impossible to win, but he also knew he couldn't give up without a fight. As the stars blinked faintly above, Ethan made a silent promise to himself. No matter what happened, he would stand his ground. For his family, for his home, for humanity. The days that followed the Valeth's arrival were filled with fear and chaos. Cities burned, and the skies remained darkened by the shadow of alien ships. Despite the overwhelming odds, small groups of survivors began to organize. In Montana, Ethan joined a local militia led by his childhood friend, Ryan Mitchell. Ryan was a wiry man with a quick temper but a good heart. He had spent years hunting in the wilderness, and his knowledge of the land made him a natural leader. Together, they gathered weapons, food, and supplies, preparing for whatever might come next. Lisa wasn't happy about Ethan joining the militia. She argued with him every night, her voice trembling with worry. "You're going to get yourself killed," she said one evening as Emily played quietly in the corner. "What happens to us if you don't come back?" Ethan sighed and knelt down in front of her. "If I don't fight, none of us will have a future," he replied. "I'm doing this for you and Emily. For all of us." Lisa didn't respond. She just hugged him tightly, tears streaming down her face. Meanwhile, in orbit, Earth's remaining space forces launched desperate attacks against the Valith fleet. The battles were brutal and one-sided. Human ships exploded in fiery bursts, their crews lost forever. General Hayes watched from command headquarters, his jaw clenched so hard it hurt. "We can't keep throwing lives away like this," one of his officers muttered. Hayes didn't say anything. He knew they were losing, but he refused to give up. Every ship, every soldier, they were buying time. Time for someone somewhere to figure out how to stop the invaders. On the ground, Ethan and Ryan led their group on raids against smaller Valith patrols. They targeted supply depots and isolated units, striking quickly and disappearing into the forest before reinforcements could arrive. It was dangerous work, but it gave people hope. Word spread about the resistance in Montana, and soon other groups began forming across the country. Ethan started receiving messages from farmers, hunters, and even former soldiers who wanted to join the fight. Each victory, no matter how small, reminded humanity that they weren't powerless. In Washington, D.C., Olivia Bennett worked tirelessly to unite the fractured nations of Earth. She traveled between underground bunkers and hidden safe houses, meeting with leaders and pleading for cooperation. But not everyone was willing to listen. Some countries had already begun negotiating with the Valith, hoping to save themselves by betraying others. Olivia felt sick when she learned about these secret deals. "They're selling us out," she told General Hayes during one tense meeting. "If we don't stand together, we're finished." Hayes nodded grimly. "Then we'll have to make sure they don't get the chance," he said. Though his tone was harsh, Olivia saw something in his eyes. Determination. Maybe there was still hope after all. One day, Ethan received a message from Olivia herself. She had heard about his group and wanted to meet. At first, Ryan was suspicious. "How do we know she's not leading them straight to us?" he asked. But Ethan trusted her. Something about her voice on the radio sounded genuine. When Olivia arrived at their camp, she explained her plan: to gather intelligence and coordinate efforts between resistance cells. "We need to hit them where it hurts," she said. "Their supply lines, their communication networks. If we can disrupt enough of their operations, we might have a chance." Ethan agreed to help, and over the next few weeks, their missions became more daring. They sabotaged Valith equipment, destroyed fuel reserves, and even managed to capture a damaged alien drone. Olivia studied the drone carefully, hoping to learn its secrets. "This could be the key," she said one night as Ethan and Ryan looked on. "If we can understand their technology, maybe we can turn it against them." But not everything went according to plan. During one raid, Ryan stayed behind to cover the group's retreat when they were ambushed. By the time Ethan realized what had happened, it was too late. Ryan was gone. Ethan blamed himself, but there was no time to grieve. The war wasn't over, and Ryan's sacrifice wouldn't be in vain. As he stood under the stars that night, Ethan made another silent promise. They would keep fighting, for Ryan, for Lisa, for Emily, and for everyone else who refused to kneel. The loss of Ryan hit Ethan hard. He barely slept, replaying the moment over and over in his mind. Ryan had been more than a friend. He was family. But there was no time to stop and mourn. The Valith were relentless, and every day brought new attacks. Ethan threw himself into planning their next moves, hoping that action would dull the pain. Lisa noticed the change in him. His eyes were hollow, his voice quieter than before. One night, she sat beside him on the porch and took his hand. "You can't carry this alone," she said softly. "Let me help. Let us help." Ethan didn't answer, but he squeezed her hand tightly. In Washington, D.C., Olivia worked around the clock, trying to piece together a strategy that could turn the tide. She knew they needed something big, something unexpected. Then, one of her contacts sent her a lead, an old research facility buried deep in the mountains of Colorado. It had been abandoned for decades, but rumors suggested it held blueprints for experimental weapons designed during the Cold War. Olivia wasted no time. She contacted Ethan and asked him to lead a team to investigate. If these plans are real, they could change everything. She told him over the radio. Ethan hesitated but finally agreed. They couldn't afford to ignore any chance, no matter how slim. The journey to the facility was treacherous. Snow blanketed the mountains, and the roads were nearly impassable. Ethan drove the group in a battered truck, with Ryan's cousin, Jake, riding shotgun. Jake was younger than Ryan, with the same wiry build but a quieter demeanor. He hadn't spoken much since Ryan's death, but he carried a rifle slung over his shoulder and moved with purpose. Behind them, 2 other members of the militia followed in a second vehicle. They'd reached the facility after hours of slow, cautious driving, its rusted gates barely hanging on their hinges. Inside, the air was cold and stale. Dust covered every surface, and the walls were cracked and crumbling. Ethan led the way, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. They searched room after room, finding nothing but empty desks and broken equipment. Just as frustration began to set in, Jake called out from a basement stairwell. "I think I found something," he shouted. The group hurried down the stairs to find a locked steel door. Using tools scavenged from the truck, they managed to pry it open. What they discovered inside left them speechless. Rows of dusty filing cabinets lined the walls, filled with papers and diagrams. In the center of the room stood a table holding incomplete prototypes, strange devices that looked like a mix of human engineering and something far more advanced. Olivia joined them later that night via video call, her face lighting up with excitement as Ethan showed her the designs. "This is incredible," she said. "These weapons might actually work against the Valeth." But not everyone shared their optimism. Back in D.C., tensions among world leaders continued to rise. Some had secretly negotiated deals with the Valeth, promising to hand over territories or resources in exchange for safety. Olivia uncovered evidence of these betrayals while reviewing intercepted communications. Her heart sank as she realized how many people were willing to sell out humanity for their own survival. Furious, she decided to leak the information to the public. She uploaded the files to a secure server and sent them to journalists and resistance groups worldwide. Within hours, the news spread like wildfire. The revelation sparked outrage. Protests erupted in cities across the globe, with people demanding accountability from their leaders. Trust shattered, and divisions grew deeper. Ethan saw the reports on a small handheld screen at their camp. For a moment, he felt a flicker of hope. Maybe humanity wasn't as divided as it seemed, but the cost of betrayal weighed heavily on everyone. Before leaving for their next mission, Ethan visited Lisa and Emily one last time. They sat together in silence, the weight of what lay ahead pressing down on them. Finally, Lisa spoke. "Promise me you'll come back," she said, her voice breaking. Ethan nodded. "I promise," he said, though he wasn't sure he believed it himself. As he drove away, Ethan glanced in the rearview mirror, watching Lisa and Emily grow smaller until they disappeared. He gripped the steering wheel tighter, focusing on the road ahead. There was no turning back now. The resistance began to grow stronger after the discovery of the experimental weapons. Ethan and his team worked tirelessly to build prototypes using the blueprints from the old research facility. It wasn't easy. Many of the designs were incomplete, and some parts required materials they didn't have. But they improvised, scavenging scrap metal from abandoned cars and salvaging components from broken electronics. Olivia stayed in constant contact, guiding them through the process and offering advice whenever she could. "We're running out of time," she reminded them during one late-night call. "Every day we delay, more people die." Despite the challenges, the first prototype was ready within weeks. It was a bulky weapon, resembling a cross between a rifle and a piece of alien tech. Ethan tested it on a Vileth patrol that had wandered too close to their camp. The results were astonishing. A single shot from the weapon sent a pulse of energy that disabled the aliens' armor and left them stunned. Jake whistled in amazement as he examined the downed patrol. "This could actually work," he said, his voice filled with cautious hope. Word of the weapon spread quickly among the resistance cells, and soon other groups began building their own versions. With the new weapons in hand, Ethan's militia launched a daring raid on a Vileth supply depot. The depot was heavily guarded, but the resistance had numbers on their side this time. Dozens of fighters joined forces, coordinating their attack with precision. Ethan led the charge, wielding the prototype weapon like a beacon of defiance. The Vileth soldiers were caught off guard by the sudden assault and struggled to respond. One by one, their defenses crumbled. By the end of the battle, the depot was in flames, and the resistance had secured vital supplies: food, medicine, and ammunition. The victory was a turning point. For the first time since the invasion began, humanity had struck a meaningful blow against the Vileth. News of the raid spread across the globe, inspiring others to take action. Resistance cells that had been isolated and disorganized started working together, sharing resources and strategies. Olivia played a key role in this effort, acting as a liaison between groups and helping them coordinate larger operations. She also used the footage of the raid to rally support from neighboring star systems. Though most alien races feared the Vileth too much to intervene directly, some sympathetic species began sending aid. Advanced tools, medical supplies, and even advisors who understood the Empire's weaknesses. But not everyone celebrated the success. General Hayes remained skeptical, believing the resistance was still underestimating the Vileth's power. "They'll retaliate," he warned during a meeting with Olivia. "And when they do, it'll be worse than anything we've seen so far." Olivia nodded grimly. She knew he was right. The Vileth wouldn't tolerate such a bold act of defiance without responding. Still, she refused to back down. "If we don't fight now, we'll never get another chance," she said firmly. Ethan felt the same way. He returned home briefly after the raid, eager to see Lisa and Emily. His daughter ran to him, her face lighting up with joy. "Daddy, you did it," she exclaimed, hugging him tightly. Ethan smiled, though his heart ached, knowing he'd have to leave again soon. Lisa watched silently from the doorway, her arms crossed. She didn't say anything at first, just studied his face. Finally, she stepped forward and hugged him. "You're changing things," she whispered. "Just come back to us." Before departing for their next mission, Ethan met with Olivia to discuss their next move. She had a bold plan: infiltrate the Vileth flagship and disable its central command hub. Without it, the Empire's fleet would lose coordination, giving humanity a fighting chance. Ethan listened carefully, his mind racing. It was a dangerous plan, almost suicidal. But if it worked, it could end the war. "I'm in," he said finally. Olivia nodded, her expression serious. "Me too," she replied. "Someone needs to document what we find up there for the galaxy to see." As Ethan prepared to leave, Lisa pleaded with him one last time to stay. "Please, Ethan," she begged, tears streaming down her face. "Think about Emily. Think about us." Ethan knelt in front of her, holding her hands. "I am thinking about you," he said softly. "That's why I have to go. If we don't stop them now, none of us will have a future." Reluctantly, Lisa let him go, kissing him goodbye before stepping back. As Ethan drove away, he glanced in the rearview mirror one last time, memorizing the sight of his family. Then he focused on the road ahead, steeling himself for the fight of his life. The infiltration mission began under the cover of darkness. Ethan and his team boarded a captured Violet transport ship, its sleek alien design blending seamlessly with the Empire's fleet. Olivia joined them, carrying a small recording device slung over her shoulder. She had insisted on coming, determined to expose the Violet's crimes to the galaxy. The group included Jake, 2 experienced pilots named Sam and Clara, and 3 other resistance fighters. They were all nervous but focused, knowing the stakes couldn't be higher. The transport ship drifted quietly toward the flagship, a massive vessel that loomed like a shadow against the stars. Its surface was covered in glowing panels and strange symbols, pulsing faintly as if alive. As they approached, Ethan tightened his grip on the prototype weapon slung across his back. "Stay sharp," he whispered to the group. "One mistake, and we're done." Once inside the flagship's docking bay, the team moved quickly. They wore stolen Valeth uniforms, hoping to blend in long enough to reach the command hub. The corridors were eerily quiet, lit by dim blue lights that cast long, distorted shadows. Every step felt like walking into a trap. At one point, they passed a group of Valeth soldiers, their towering forms clad in black armor. Ethan held his breath, keeping his head down as they walked past. The aliens didn't notice them, but Jake's hand hovered near his weapon just in case. As they neared the core chamber, things started to go wrong. A patrol spotted them, and alarms blared through the ship. Red warning lights flashed, bathing the corridors in an ominous glow. "Move," Ethan shouted, breaking into a run. The team split up, drawing the guards away from the main group. Gunfire erupted behind them as Jake and Clara stayed behind to hold off the pursuing soldiers. Ethan wanted to turn back, but Olivia grabbed his arm. "We have to keep going," she urged. Reluctantly, he nodded and pushed forward. They reached the command hub after what felt like hours. The room was enormous, filled with glowing consoles and holographic displays. In the center stood Zoreth, the Violet commander, his massive frame draped in ornate armor. His eyes glowed with cold, calculating intelligence as he turned to face them. "You think you can stop us?" he sneered, his voice deep and resonant. "Your defiance is meaningless." Ethan stepped forward, raising the prototype weapon. "Not meaningless," he said firmly. "It's hope." He fired, sending a pulse of energy toward Zoreth. The blast struck the commander's armor, cracking it slightly. Zoreth roared in anger, charging at Ethan with terrifying speed. The two fought fiercely, Zoreth relying on brute strength, while Ethan used quick thinking and agility to dodge his attacks. Olivia worked frantically at one of the consoles, trying to disable the command hub. Just as Zoreth knocked Ethan to the ground, Olivia managed to trigger a system shutdown. The room shook violently as the flagship's systems began to fail. "We've done it," she cried. But Zoreth wasn't finished. He lunged at Ethan again, pinning him to the floor. Summoning every ounce of strength, Ethan jammed the prototype weapon into Zoreth's chest and fired. The alien let out a deafening scream before collapsing, his body convulsing with energy. The flagship trembled around them, its defenses crumbling. "We need to get out of here," Olivia shouted. Ethan grabbed her hand, and they ran back through the chaotic corridors. Along the way, they found Jake and Clara, battered but alive. Together, they fought their way back to the transport ship and launched just as the flagship began to break apart. From a safe distance, they watched as the massive vessel exploded, sending shockwaves through space. The Valeth fleet scattered, retreating without their leader. Ethan leaned back in his seat, exhausted but victorious. Olivia recorded everything, her hands trembling as she saved the footage. For the first time in months, there was hope, not just for Earth, but for everyone who had suffered under the Valeth's rule. The Valeth fleet retreated into the depths of space, their once unstoppable armada reduced to a disorganized scattering of ships. The destruction of the flagship had sent shockwaves through their ranks, leaving them without direction or coordination. On Earth, people watched the alien ships vanish from the skies, their glowing forms fading like dying embers. Cheers erupted in cities and towns as survivors realized the tide had finally turned. Humanity wasn't free yet, but for the first time in months, there was a glimmer of hope. Ethan stood on the deck of the transport ship, staring at the retreating fleet. His body ached from the fight, and his mind was heavy with everything he'd witnessed. Zorath's final scream still echoed in his ears. Jake approached him quietly, his face pale but determined. "We did it," Jake said, though his voice lacked triumph. Ethan nodded slowly. "For now," he replied. "But we're not done yet." Inside the ship, Olivia reviewed the footage she had recorded during the mission. Her hand shook as she replayed the images of Zorath's arrogance, the horrifying symbols etched into the walls of the flagship, and the evidence of countless atrocities committed by the Vaylith across the galaxy. This was more than just proof. It was a call to action. She uploaded the files to a secure network, broadcasting them to every corner of human civilization and beyond. Within hours, the truth about the Vaylith spread like wildfire. Alien species who had feared the Empire began reaching out, offering support and resources to humanity. For the first time, Earth wasn't alone. Back home in Montana, Lisa waited anxiously for Ethan's return. Emily sat beside her, clutching a worn stuffed bear. They had heard the news about the Vaylith retreat, but Lisa couldn't relax until she saw Ethan with her own eyes. When the transport ship finally landed near their farmhouse, she ran to meet him, tears streaming down her face. Ethan embraced her tightly, holding her as if afraid she might disappear. "You came back," she whispered, her voice trembling. Ethan kissed her forehead. "I promised I would," he said softly. Emily tugged at his sleeve, looking up at him with wide eyes. "Did you beat the bad guys?" she asked. Ethan knelt down and smiled at her. "We hurt them," he said. "But we have to stay strong. There's still work to do." Lisa frowned, worry creasing her brow. "What happens now?" she asked. Ethan sighed. "We rebuild, and we make sure they never come back." In Washington, D.C., General Hayes watched the same broadcast Olivia had sent out. His expression was unreadable, but his fists clenched tightly. He knew this was only the beginning. The Vaylith weren't gone. They were regrouping. Humanity needed to prepare for whatever came next. He called an emergency meeting with global leaders, urging them to unite under one banner. "This isn't over," he warned. "If we don't stand together, they'll crush us when they return." Olivia took charge of Earth's diplomatic efforts, working tirelessly to form alliances with sympathetic alien races. She traveled to distant planets, sharing the story of humanity's resistance and pleading for help. Many species were hesitant, fearful of provoking the Vaylith's wrath, but others offered aid. Ships carrying supplies and technology arrived in orbit, bolstering Earth's defenses. Slowly but surely, humanity began to rebuild. Ethan returned to farming, though he remained active in the resistance. He spent his days tending to crops and his nights teaching new recruits how to use the experimental weapons. Ryan's memory lingered in everything he did, a quiet reminder of the cost of freedom. Lisa often joined him in the fields, finding solace in the simple act of planting seeds. Together, they worked toward a future where their daughter could grow up without fear. As the months passed, Earth began to heal. Cities rose from the ashes, and families reunited under brighter skies. But no one forgot the lessons learned during the war. Humanity had faced annihilation and refused to kneel. They had proven that even the smallest acts of defiance could spark change. And though scars remained, they served as a testament to resilience, a promise that no matter what challenges lay ahead, humanity would endure. Months after the Vaylith retreat, Earth began to change in ways no one had expected. The scars of war were still visible, ruined cities, empty fields where homes once stood, and families forever altered by loss. But there was a new sense of purpose. Humanity had faced its darkest hour and emerged stronger. Ethan watched this transformation from his farm in Montana, where green shoots of wheat now poked through the soil. It was hard work, but every sprout felt like a victory, a symbol of renewal. Lisa helped him in the fields, her laughter returning little by little. Emily ran barefoot through the rows of crops, chasing butterflies and singing songs she made up on the spot. Life wasn't perfect, but it was peaceful. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Ethan stood on the porch with Lisa, watching their daughter play. "Do you think they'll come back?" Lisa asked softly. Ethan didn't answer right away. He thought about the battles they'd fought, the sacrifices they'd made. "Maybe," he said finally. "But if they do, we'll be ready." Meanwhile, Olivia continued her work building alliances across the galaxy. She traveled from planet to planet, meeting leaders of alien species who had once feared the Valeth. Many were inspired by humanity's courage and offered aid, not just weapons or ships, but knowledge and friendship. Through these connections, Earth became part of something bigger, a coalition of planets united against tyranny. Olivia often thought about the people she'd left behind, the farmers, soldiers, and families who had risked everything for freedom. Their story gave her strength when the road ahead seemed uncertain. General Hayes stayed busy preparing for the future. He oversaw the construction of new defense systems, training programs, and early warning networks to detect any sign of the Valeth's return. Though gruff and demanding, he earned respect for his dedication. "We can't afford to forget what happened," he told his officers during one briefing. "If we do, we'll lose everything we've gained." His words resonated deeply, reminding everyone that peace required vigilance. Back in Montana, Ethan received occasional visits from resistance fighters passing through the area. They'd brought news of other regions rebuilding, sharing stories of hope and resilience. Jake stopped by one day, his face lined with exhaustion but his eyes bright. "Things are getting better," he said, leaning against the fence as Ethan worked nearby. "People are starting to believe in tomorrow again." Ethan nodded, wiping sweat from his brow. "That's good," he replied. "Believing is half the battle." As time went on, Earth flourished in unexpected ways. Scientists studied the technology recovered from the Valeth, using it to improve medicine, energy production, and communication. Artists painted murals of heroes like Ethan, Olivia, and Ryan, turning their stories into legends. Schools taught children about the invasion, not as a tale of fear, but as a lesson in unity and determination. Humanity had learned that even in the face of overwhelming odds, standing together could make all the difference. One crisp autumn morning, Ethan climbed a hill overlooking his farm. The field stretched out before him, golden and alive with promise. He thought about Ryan, whose sacrifice had paved the way for so much. He thought about Lisa and Emily, who reminded him daily why he fought. And he thought about the galaxy beyond, full of possibilities both beautiful and dangerous. For the first time in years, he felt at peace. Down below, Lisa called out to him, holding Emily's hand. "Dinner's ready," she shouted, waving. Ethan smiled and started down the hill, joining his family at the table. As they ate together under the soft glow of lantern light, he realized something important. The war had changed them all, but it hadn't broken them. Instead, it had forged something stronger, a bond between people, a shared belief in a brighter future. In the end, humanity had proven one thing above all else. No empire, no matter how powerful, could extinguish the spirit of those who refused to kneel. And though challenges lay ahead, Ethan knew they would face them together. Underneath the stars, in fields once turned to dust, new life was taking root, and it would grow for generations to come.